Welcome back to Northwestern Outdoors Radio. I'm John Kruse. We're heading to LaGrande in Northeast Oregon. That's where we're going to talk to Justus Gray. He is the owner of Wolf Creek Hunting, and fitting for his first name, he is also a new Oregon State Trooper. Justus, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So, Justus, number one, thank you for your service, and do me a favor, be safe out there. But tell us a little bit about your side business you've been doing for a few years now. Wolf Creek Hunting, what do you do?
Wolf Creek Hunting, I have a website called wolfcreekhunt.com. I'm trying to turn it into kind of your one-stop shop for everything you need big game hunting-wise. It started off with making duck calls kind of as a hobby. Started off with wanting to make a duck call because I had bought some cheap ones and I didn't like the way they sounded, and I got intrigued at how they were made. And so I got into making these duck calls, and I was like, well, maybe I should try to sell a few, and it kind of rolled into side business. And now I sell Element Outdoors clothing apparel online, Echelon Optics, and then I also make a line of custom elk calls.
All right, well, let's focus on your calls today, your elk calls and your duck calls. We'll start off with your elk calls. I understand you've got a new line of latex diaphragm elk calls that are coming out. Tell our listeners more about those.
Yeah, these have been in the making for the past couple of years. I've been working on basically through trial and error, figuring out what materials work best, sounds I can produce and replicate. And so I'm going to have 3 new latex calls that are going to be available through my website the beginning of May of this year. And I have 3 different kinds. One's going to be estrus cow call. The second one's designed to produce kind of more mature sounding cow calls. And then the last one's you can do kind of everything that you need to do along with challenging bugles. And so those are the 3 latex calls that I'm coming out with.
Now, I understand that you stumbled onto something when you were making these latex calls that's a little bit different than what's out there from the competition.
Yeah, so what you're going to find a lot of people want is a pallet plate on their diaphragm calls. And what that is, it's a little dome that they put on top of the frame. And I don't have those. But what's unique about these ones is I intentionally have a large frame. I overstretch the latex. And what that allows me to do is I actually bend the frame slightly so that it has the right tension on the latex. It also creates a natural crown. What that allows is for you to have this diaphragm in your mouth, and it sits properly on the roof of your mouth, and it creates more space between the top of your mouth and the latex. It allows it to sit in there basically with the same effect as a pallet plate or a dome would, but you don't have one.
Ingenious. Way to build a better mousetrap, or in this case, a better elk call. You know, why don't you get out that estrus cow call and let our listeners hear how it sounds on the air.
I'm not sure how well you can hear that, but it's very, very easy to use. It takes very little pressure. It's very easy to maintain the pressure with your tongue, and I'm pretty proud of this. It's going to be a great little call.
Oh, sounds like it's probably bringing in the bulls already. I love it. Let's go ahead and talk next about your wooden duck calls. And again, folks, we're talking to Justus Gray. He's based out of LaGrande, Oregon, and he owns a company called Wolf Creek Hunting. He makes elk calls, he makes duck calls, and he sells other products as well on his website at wolfcreekhunt.com. Your duck calls, which is where you got started, acrylic versus wood. What's the differences in terms of sound between them?
Acrylic is more dense than wood. Wood's porous, of course, even exotic hardwood. And so what wood does, it actually absorbs the sound that you're getting from that mylar reed as it vibrates. And so it actually produces a softer tone, whereas an acrylic call, it's going to not absorb that sound and that vibrations from the reed, and it's going to actually push it out the exhaust port at the end of the call. So it's going to project louder, basically. So a wood call, you're basically going to get a softer sounding call. Acrylic's going to be much more clear, crisp, and just flat out louder.
Interesting. All right. So we're going to put it to the test again. Why don't you just do a quick comeback call, and we'll start off with the wood, and then we'll go with the acrylic and see if we can pick up the difference here on the air.
Okay. We'll give her a shot here with the wood call first here.
All right. Well, Justus, I'll tell you what. You're a better caller than I am already. That much we've gotten out of the chute. Let's try the acrylic call and see how that sounds with the same comeback call.
Okay, we'll give it a shot here with the acrylic. I'm not sure if you can tell the difference, but in my house here, it's definitely louder.
I think it is louder as well, and there definitely is a difference. So when it comes to waterfowl hunting, where does a duck hunter go to get a limit? You know, you live in the shadow of the Blue and the Wallowa Mountains. I know you've got the Ladmarsh Wildlife Area. I'm guessing that's pretty crowded, though. Where else do you go hunting around there, or is that the place?
So in terms of public land access, Ladmarsh is your best bet because waterfowl hunting here in Union, Wallowa counties, even Baker County, it's pretty tricky. Early season September goose, you can get a good bag limit pretty easily. But later in the year, we rely on that cold front coming down from the north. And so that pushes the birds south here. But then it has to be pretty darn cold for them to get past the Columbia River. And so it's always a struggle to be able to find open water when it is cold enough to push the birds down. And if they aren't, then you basically got to go where the birds are, which is going to be the Columbia River and the wildlife refuges. So it's actually pretty tough. You got to rely on getting access to private ponds and different things, and then just work on breaking ice, and hopefully the birds show up.
The struggle is real. All right.
Yeah, it is. It's brutal.
Sticking with Eastern Oregon and switching to elk. Obviously, you know what you're doing when it comes to calling in elk. What's the biggest bull you've called in, and where was it?
I've actually never elk hunted outside of the state of Oregon. I'm pretty spoiled to live right here where I do, where I can literally walk out of my house and within 15 minutes be in the elk sign. So the biggest bull that I've called in was actually when I was working with a prototype of my mature cow call, and it was 2 years ago. And I had basically given up on elk hunting. I had gone like 17 days without even hearing one. And I actually had a really nice mule deer spotted, and I was sitting on this sagebrush knoll that was really shallow sagebrush, about only ankle high. And I was glassing for this mule deer that I had patterned, and I heard this chuckle like way, way back behind me in the timberline. And I actually thought it was my stepbrother who was with me. And I thought, oh, what the heck, I'll go ahead and I'll just dig out my latex call. I hadn't called on it for like 2 weeks. I let out the most pitiful, just god-awful cow call that you could imagine. It didn't even sound like a cow. And I was so disgusted with myself, I just threw it back in my pocket, turned my back, and kept glassing. Anyway, about 15 minutes later, I heard the scuffle of rocks from behind me, and I looked behind, and I'm not very good at judging on the hoof, and I'm not a trophy hunter by any means. So if it's over 300, I have a hard time telling if it's a 300 or if it's like 350. All I remember was seeing these humongous whale tails on the back of the 6-pound bulls that came in. And he just went 180 degrees around me, and the furthest away he got was about 30 yards. And I was so unprepared. I didn't have an arrow nocked. I didn't even have my bow within reach. The only thing I had on me was a GoPro in my lap, and I was like, well, I'll at least get some cool video. And I turned it on, and my battery was dead.
Oh!
That was the biggest bull, and that was my one killable encounter for that entire season. He got downwind of me. He kind of looked at me and then trotted off down the hill 100 yards and looked back and saw me crying and then trotted off out of my life.
All right, Justus, that was a great story, but a heartbreaking story.
Valuable lessons learned. Now I make sure that even when I hear any sort of thing that I think might be a hunter, I go ahead and I knock an arrow just in case. You never know.
Great advice and great lesson learned. We have got to go, but folks, if you want to find out more about these duck calls and these elk calls and buy them, the place to go to is wolfcreekhunt.com. That's wolfcreekhunt.com. These calls are made by Justus Gray. He lives in LaGrande, Oregon. And as you just heard, these calls sound great. Justus, thanks for sharing this with us today on Northwestern Outdoors Radio.
Thank you very much for having me.
Backcountry Hunters and Anglers' 7th Annual Rendezvous is coming to Boise, Idaho. Join fellow sportsmen and women from across North America for an event-filled weekend at the Boise Center, April 12th through the 14th. For tickets, go to backcountryhunters.org.
If you're after really big game, it only makes sense to have the best scope you can put on your rifle. That's why you want the Leupold VX6 HD. This high-definition scope gives you sharpened clarity, and the Twilight Max light management system gives you the sight advantage you need at dawn and dusk when those big bucks, bulls, and Bruins are on the move. Add on our lifetime gold ring guarantee, and you've got the rifle scope of your dreams. It's the Leupold VX6 HD. Look for it at a quality sporting goods store near you and at leupold.com.